a mother-in-law who delights in bullying her daughter-in-law. Right after I announced my pregnancy, she suddenly threw a mug at me. The steam rising from the spilled coffee spoke of its scalding heat. Surprised? The prank was a huge success. She laughed without a shred of remorse, and I felt an anger inside me like never before. If you're gonna play nasty pranks like that, be prepared. My name is Anna. I'm a 29-year-old part-time. I've been married to my husband, Harold, for 4 years, and we haven't been blessed with children yet. We do want them, but such things are gifts, after all. We're starting to think about going to the clinic soon. But for now, I've begun to think about our diet and to make sure we get moderate exercise. The physical aspect is important, but so is the mental. Above all, stress is a big enemy. Though part-time, my job is quite stressful, but considering our finances, quitting isn't an option. Luckily, it's a good place to work with nice people. So, job-related stress is minor and somewhat endearing. But unfortunately, there's something incredibly stressful outside of work. That would be the presence of my mother-in-law. It's common for families to have intense mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflicts. Our home is no exception. The day we decided to get married and went to say hello, my mother-in-law was already a strong character from the first meeting. "So you're the wicked woman who's stealing my son?" I remember how my pasted-on smile froze at that moment. Glaring up at me, she said, "Look here, just because you're gonna marry Harold doesn't mean you can get cocky. Just so you know, I've known my son longer and better than you ever will." In what world does a mother-in-law compete with a daughter-in-law over how long they've known her son? Sure, you've known him longer, you're his mother, after all. This mom loves her son too much. I was completely taken aback. It's probably better than her hating her son, but being overly doting can be tough. It's like she reluctantly gave up on marrying her son because they're blood-related. I was just thinking this when she actually said it, and I was seriously taken aback. Can I really get along with such a mother-in-law? No way. From the start, my mother-in-law didn't want to get along with me, her daughter-in-law. Because she's like this, naturally, her bullying is quite intense. We don't live together, but she lives nearby and frequently comes to our house. Her unannounced visits are annoying, and since she's a housewife, she comes over whenever she likes, regardless of whether it's a weekday or weekend. Of course, I've never received a heads up from her. She comes over even when she knows my husband and I might be out at work, and if we're not there, the complaints pile up on the answering machine. "Why aren't you home?" And that's not all. When we're not home, she involves the neighbors. She waits for another resident to enter and sneaks in with them. I think it's practically criminal, but she insists she's not in the wrong, saying, "It's your fault for not being home." But even if she gets in, we're not there. What's she gonna do once she's at our door? Turns out, she makes a scene. I've been kicked out by the demon wife. The key won't work, she continues to shout, drawing the neighbors out to see what's up. Then she says, "There's a demon wife in this house. Call the police." Can you believe that? When the lady next door told me, "Your mother-in-law was," I nearly fainted. I was so embarrassed I felt like my face was on fire, and when I went around apologizing to the neighbors, I felt like crying. Despite my husband giving her a stern talking to, she hasn't learned her lesson. Just recently, she used the same tactic to reach our condo door and then shouted, "Has anyone seen where my daughter-in-law has gone?" She's a bit neurotic because she can't have a baby. I was keeping an eye on her to make sure she didn't wander off, but where has she gone? I really wish she would stop. No matter how much my husband or father-in-law say, she doesn't stop the harassment. To be honest, it's not just harassment towards me, it affects my husband too, but she doesn't seem to realize it. It's really infuriating to see her smirk when she sees me troubled. She's been asking my husband for a spare key, but thankfully, he's refusing. It's amazing she thinks she'd get one after all this trouble. She probably thinks if she had the key, there wouldn't be any fuss, but I can easily imagine the disaster that would ensue inside our home. In fact, I've already experienced it. In the beginning of our marriage, When I still underestimated my mother-in-law, I gave in to her demand of "I'm your family, after all," and handed over a spare key. Well, that was a big mistake. When I got back from my part-time job, all my belongings were piled up in front of the entrance. Shocked, I went inside and was even more astonished. The walls were plastered with photos of my mother-in-law and my husband as a child, and picture frames were placed around. The groceries I had stocked up were used without my permission, and my pre-made meals were thrown out, replaced by my mother-in-law's cooking in the fridge. Stunned, my mother-in-law proclaimed, I should be the one cooking for my son, as I'm his mother. Furthermore, she declared, I will sleep in the bedroom with my son. You should sleep in the living room. She even said, there's no place for your belongings in this house. It's for my things. Restoring the belongings she had thrown out was a real hassle. I immediately had my husband take back the spare key. But here's the thing. Unbelievably, she had made a copy of the spare key. When I faced the second redecoration, it caught me off guard and I just crumbled. So I immediately added another lock. Seriously, my mother-in-law's obsession with Harold is just too much. It's gotten to the point where her doting is just creepy. Of course, my husband does scold her. Lectured by her beloved son, she pretends to be remorseful, only to repeat the same behavior. She never learns. It wasn't until he threatened to ban her from our home that she finally quieted down a bit. Really, just a bit. At least she stopped involving the neighbors. But the bullying by her continues. At this point, I guess, it's like her hobby. Is bullying her daughter-in-law her reason for living? No joke. There were times I'd come home from work to find a Tupperware full of her homemade food stuffed into the mailbox. Please don't forcefully cram it in and mess up the mail. Sighing, I'd pull it out to find it filled with food I hate. It was the very thing I'd told her I disliked when she once asked, "What don't you like?" Such a detailed form of harassment. And it's food my husband isn't fond of either. On closer inspection, the Tupperware had labels. This one's for the daughter-in-law. This one's for my sonny boy. His container was packed with his favorite dishes. How much free time does she have to make several dishes just to harass someone? She really should find a hobby other than bullying her daughter-in-law. Just the other day, she left some clothes she'd gone out of her way to buy at a department store. They were the complete opposite of my style, or rather, who would wear such bizarre things? Walking around in such flashy designs would definitely draw attention in many ways. My husband made it clear he wouldn't want to be seen walking with me in that. Yet my mother-in-law left it with a note saying, "Send me a picture of you wearing it." That outfit is now just taking up space in my closet. Of course, I've never worn it. If she really bought it at a department store, I'd like to bring a sales clerk over here. I'd like to ask why they decided to sell such clothes. With all this going on, the stress from my mother-in-law's bullying is unbearable. How am I supposed to even think about having kids in this state of mind? I find myself sighing every day. However, life is strange, isn't it? When all you think about is, I want a baby, it doesn't happen, but when your mind shifts to something like, well, it'd be nice to have one, but first I've got to deal with my mother-in-law. That's when it happens. No way! One day, I found myself shaking as I held a pregnancy test in front of me. There it was, a clear positive result. I rushed out of the bathroom and exclaimed, "It's positive." Whoa, you scared me! Have you not been out in a few days? Thanks for the cliché misunderstanding. But no, it's a positive pregnancy test. Ignoring my husband's typical comment, I thrust the pregnancy test towards him. Huh? Positive? Yes, positive. What? I'm serious. Positive, are we having a baby? Yes. My husband must have been worrying more and more that it wouldn't happen. It took him a moment to grasp what I was saying. Then it finally sunk in. Really? Really? Yes. Thank you, Anna. We did it. We both cried and hugged each other. After we celebrated for a while, we realized that pregnancy is really just the beginning. The early stages require that I shouldn't overexert myself. So, I cut back on my part-time job. As a result, our income decreased, but it's a necessary expense from our savings. I'll work harder, my husband declared, fired up. It's really appreciated. I'll do the shopping and carry the bags. Anna, you don't need to lift anything heavier than a fork. I'll cook too, he announced. It's nice, but a bit over the top. Just so you know, the clothes I'm wearing are already heavier than a fork. After I told him his care was becoming a bit much, he shifted to doing things that I specifically asked for. Thankfully, we successfully confirmed the pregnancy sac and the heartbeat. Hooray! We were overjoyed. As we looked at the photo of the pregnancy sac from the hospital, my husband and I started to discuss what comes next. Yes, here's where the trouble begins. It was like, how do we announce the pregnancy to our parents? My family already has a grandchild from my brother, so it won't be a grandchild fever there. So, we decided to just tell them normally. The problem is on my husband's side. It's always his side, or rather, the problem is my mother-in-law. Normally with a normal mother-in-law, you would just tell her, but his mother is not normal. Still, we can't not tell her, right? Right, we agreed. Both agreed, albeit reluctantly. If it were just my mother-in-law, we might consider keeping it quiet, but my father-in-law is there too. It would be unfair to him not to tell, as it's their first grandchild. So, we decided, albeit reluctantly, to go to my husband's parents' house to announce the pregnancy. We thought about just calling to announce our pregnancy like I did with my family, but since we live close and to avoid any fuss later, we decided to visit his parents' house over the weekend. Right as we opened the front door, my mother-in-law exclaimed, "Oh, Harold! What a surprise, come in," and she pulled him inside. Of course, I was left alone, standing at the entrance. As I hesitated about whether it was okay to just walk in, Harold quickly came back and said, "Sorry, Anna, my mom's grip is like a wrestler's." I couldn't resist. "Come in." Following him, my father-in-law came out and greeted me with an apologetic look. "I'm sorry you always have to deal with this, Anna. She's really good at sneaking around me." It seems he is quite overwhelmed by her too. As Harold and I sat on a two-seater sofa in the living room, my mother-in-law wedged herself between us. "Hey, this sofa is for two people. It's painful, don't push." I had to stand up quickly, and Harold angrily said, "What are you doing, Mom?" Then she replied unabashedly, "Well, it's been so long since my son came home. I want to sit next to you." "Come on, Mom." "Hey, Mirabelle." Before Harold could say anything, my father-in-law spoke up in a stern voice. "But move over." "Okay." He didn't yell, but his presence was commanding enough that even my mother-in-law reluctantly moved. They sat across from us. And finally, Harold said, "We're having a baby," which was the real reason for our visit today. "Congratulations!" Hearing this, my father-in-law's eyes widened before he smiled happily and offered his congratulations. He's usually so expressionless and quiet, so seeing him genuinely happy made me feel happy too. I wonder about my mother-in-law, though. She might end up ecstatically claiming, "I'll raise my grandchild." Harold seemed to think so too. We both braced for her reaction. But contrary to our expectations, she kept her head down and didn't move. I thought she'd lift her head with a sparkling face saying, "I'll take care of my grandchild." This was an unexpected reaction, and as we watched, she slowly raised her head. "What?" Tears were streaming down her face. But it was clear these weren't tears of joy. Because she was glaring at me with a fierce expression. "I won't forgive this." "What?" What did my mother-in-law just say? As I tilted my head in confusion, she shouted louder, "I won't forgive this." "She's pregnant? Harold's child? This woman? She took my son from me, and now a baby too. I won't forgive this, never. Harold is mine, and if he has a child, it just means more enemies for me. I've been trying to get her out of the house. Why won't she leave? Why won't she divorce Harold? Why a child? Mirabelle. While glaring at me with a resentful face, my mother-in-law's mouth moved frantically. If my father-in-law hadn't stopped her, she surely would have continued. Startled by her name being called, she snapped out of it. But until then, I was truly frightened by the demonic look she had given me. It was the first time I felt genuine fear towards her, as if she were possessed by something. "Oh, I'm sorry," she apologized hastily. But despite her apology now, my fear didn't subside. I was thinking about how I just wanted to leave when she said, "I'll go make some coffee," and headed to the kitchen. After she left, my father-in-law deeply bowed and said, "I'm truly sorry, both of you. Dad, Mom's behavior, it's seriously not right." Yes, I think so too. Childcare was her life, after all. I'm also to blame. I wanted her to be a housewife, but that effectively trapped her in a small world. My father-in-law said sadly. What should have been a joyous announcement had somehow turned the atmosphere sour. "Just going to head home now," my husband said as my mother-in-law returned with the coffee. "Oh, I've prepared some nice coffee. At least have some before you leave." My husband looked at me troubled. "It's just coffee," I said, and he apologized with a sorry look. Honestly, my straightforward feeling was anger. Why do we have to feel so unpleasant about something that should be joyous? It's all her fault, isn't it? Thinking about it made me genuinely upset. This definitely wasn't morning sickness. However, contrary to my anger, my mother-in-law now sported a calm, smiling face, as if her earlier behavior was a lie. "I'm really sorry, Anna. I said some strange things out of shock." It was my father-in-law who responded to that. "Exactly. What are you thinking?" "Right, I'm sorry. Come to think of it, an apology from my mother-in-law might be a first. She tends to be overbearing, but with her husband by her side, she might actually behave more normally." With that thought, I glanced at her hands. The steam rising heavily spoke of coffee's heat. "That's right, you're married, and it's perfectly normal to be blessed with a child." "That's right, Mom. I need to behave properly too." "That's right, Mirabelle. I'm gonna be a grandfather, and you're gonna be a grandmother." She smiled serenely, as if a spell had been lifted from her. Relieved, my husband and father-in-law began to talk. This might be the first time we've had such a peaceful moment with my mother-in-law around. Could it be possible that from now on, things will be calm? Maybe her outbursts are a thing of the past. I thought so. "Be careful, it's hot." She handed a mug to her husband. "Don't burn yourself." She passed one to my husband. I was absent-mindedly watching her hands. It was just then. "Here, Anna, take this too. Make sure you catch it." It was the moment I responded with a puzzled huh to her words. I saw her face, joyously brandishing a mug at me. Then, the mug came flying towards me. It was filled with scalding hot coffee. "What? Anna, watch out!" Frozen by the sudden event, I couldn't move. I could hear my husband's voice. And suddenly my view was obscured by his back. A splashing sound followed by the noise of the mug hitting the floor and breaking. Even as I heard this, I was still unable to move. I snapped back to reality when I heard my husband's voice saying, "Ouch," near my ear. "Honey, so hot. Are you all right?" "Yeah, I'm okay. I managed to shield it with my clothes, so it didn't hit me directly." "But still." I glanced at the floor where steam was still rising from the spilled coffee. The thought of how hot the coffee was and what could have happened if it had hit my face directly sent shivers down my spine. "What did you do?" I shouted, looking at her with accusatory eyes, but she seemed just as stunned by the unexpected incident. "Mirabelle." My father-in-law approached her, his face red with anger. At that moment, as if waking up from a trance, my mother-in-law exclaimed, "Oh my God," and rushed to the fridge to grab some ice. "No need, just cool it with water." My husband mentioned that it was only over his clothes, but he must have still felt the heat. He rolled up his sleeve and went to the sink to run cold water over his arm. As I heard the sound of water running and my husband cooling his arm, I glared fiercely at my mother-in-law.
What were you thinking? What do you mean? My hand just slipped a bit. You were aiming right at my face, weren't you? What if it had hit me?
It's fine since nothing happened.
That's not okay. My husband could have been burned.
It's your fault for not catching it properly.
What?
I was stunned by her response. She initially seemed remorseful, but then she became defiant.
What? It was just a little prank, wasn't it? Making such a big fuss over something so small is crazy. A prank.
I was dumbfounded and lost for words. To my astonishment, she smirked and said, "Didn't I tell you, it just slipped." "Ahaha, gotcha, did I scare you?"
The prank was a huge success.
She even laughed. It really felt like everything went dark before my eyes, a saying that I realized was true in moments like this. My vision wasn't just obscured, it was overwhelmed by rage, a fiery red that seemed to blaze before me. How could someone go this far over mother-in-law antics? And to laugh about it, claiming it was a slip of the hand or a mere accident, even when her own son could have been severely burned. Unbelievable.
Mirabelle, what are you doing?
What's the big deal?
I was just trying to lighten the mood because everyone seemed so tense. It was just a little prank. If Harold hadn't stepped in, it would have missed and hit the floor. She's pregnant, for heaven's sake.
So what?
Why is she acting all high and mighty just because she's pregnant?
Faced with her words, I realized that talking to her was pointless, and I walked away from the scene. When I went to check on my husband, he seemed to have avoided a burn, adjusting his sleeve. But he was gripping his phone, seemingly making a call.
Are you okay?
I worried he might have called an ambulance because he was seriously injured. As I approached, filled with anxiety, he smiled reassuringly to signal that he was okay.
No, sorry, but I need it urgently.
My husband said so before hanging up the phone.
Did you call an ambulance?
No, I'm fine, really.
Not an ambulance, but I called someone else.
Someone else? In front of me, my husband smiled reassuringly as if to say everything was okay. And behind, my in-laws were arguing fiercely, much like a couple in the midst of a heated marital spat.
I can't take this anymore. What the hell are you thinking? What are you thinking? That woman is a demon wife who stole our son. Demon wife? That's you. Or rather, a demon mother in your case. Either way, what you did is unforgivable. What she did is even more unforgivable.
Oh, what a mess. I was unsure of what to do next, but I certainly had no intention of siding with my mother-in-law. Despite everything turning out okay this time, it was a dangerous situation not just for my husband but for me as well. As I gently placed my hand on my stomach, my husband peered at me worriedly and asked, "Are you okay?" I responded with a reassuring smile to let him know that I was fine. However, continuing any interaction with my mother-in-law might be too risky, given the stress it could cause. Both mentally and physically. It might be best to cut ties until the baby is born. It was just then that I thought about this. The doorbell rang. We couldn't tell who was at the door. Seizing the moment to escape my father-in-law's imposing presence, my mother-in-law quickly declared, "Oh, someone's here," and scurried off. She ignored his protest. "Hey, we're not done talking." "Hello, who is it?" she asked, and the sound of the door opening followed. Immediately after, a surprised cry from her echoed, "What?" Wondering what was happening, my husband suggested, "Let's go see," and I decided to follow him. Together with my husband and father-in-law, I approached the entrance, and we all expressed our surprise. "What? Police?
Why?"
To my surprise, I saw a stern-faced police officer standing at the door. Nervously, my mother-in-law stammered, "May I help you?" The officer replied, "We received a report." "May we speak with you?"
A report.
Her face turned pale. She seemed utterly shocked as the officer continued, "We have a report of an assault." "Is that true?" Her face turned white as a ghost.
What are you talking about? Admit your guilt, Mom. I haven't done anything.
"Well, we can use my burn as evidence then."
What?
Astonished, she stared at my husband. He extended his arm, where the coffee had splashed, displaying it in front of her. I was momentarily worried, remembering his earlier assurance that he was fine. Was he lying? But looking at his determined profile, I understood. I see. This is an act. Indeed, as his wife, I could discern when he was pretending. Perhaps due to her panic, my mother-in-law couldn't see through the act. Especially with the police officer right there, who could blame her for not staying calm? The officer narrowed his eyes with my husband's words. "A burn? How did that happen?" My mother threw a mug of boiling coffee at me. At that moment, she cried out, "No, that's a lie."
It's not a lie. The broken mug is still scattered in the living room.
Looks like this is a case for arrest then. So, I'm arresting you. With that, the police officer surprisingly pulled out handcuffs. Is an arrest that simple? I wasn't the only one shocked. My mother-in-law looked even more astonished and confronted my husband with a demonic expression.
Harold! You're betraying your own mother. After all I've done for you. You're a curse on your parents.
My mother-in-law, driven insane by the belief that her beloved son had betrayed her. But he retorted, "You were the first one to betray, Mom." She fell silent, unable to argue.
Why can't you be happy that I've found a woman I love more than anyone else? Why can't you be happy we're having a child? Why do you insist I become a man who would silently watch his beloved wife get hurt?
She couldn't respond to her son's words.
I cared about you, Mom. I hated the harassment towards Anna and wanted it to stop. I've even been tough on you before, believing it all stemmed from your love for me, but I can't forgive you anymore. Harold, if you're gonna hurt my family, my wife and baby, then I'm cutting ties with you. What?
My mother-in-law, who had already gone pale, turned even whiter upon hearing her son's declaration to cut ties. Her eyes were wide and bloodshot, and her lips trembled uncontrollably.
You're joking, Harold, right? Cutting ties, you can't be serious. It's no joke. I'll never see you again, and neither will your grandchild. That's too much. Who's really being too much here? You should be happy. You won't have to see the daughter-in-law you hate or the grandchild you tried to harm. You won't have to see a son who values his family. No, I can't stand that. Not that.
She cried out and broke down in tears, but his decision was firm. Looking down coldly, his eyes showed no trace of filial affection. She slowly retreated further into the house. Wait, what about the arrest? Turning back, I saw the officer was shaking hands firmly with my husband. Thanks, Kevin. Sorry for the trouble. Don't mention it. Just treat me to a drink next time.
Of course.
See you around then. After that conversation with my husband, the police officer, Kevin, left.
What?
Stunned, I looked at my husband, who returned my gaze with a mischievous, impish grin. He's actually an old classmate from junior high school named Kevin. Mom never knew who I hung out with back then.
Kevin is a cop?
No, he's just a regular office worker who's into cosplay.
Cosplay?
Cosplay, that's where people dress up as characters from comics, right? I knew he had a police cosplay set because he'd shown me a picture before. Once you take a good look, you can tell it's nothing like a real police officer's uniform, though. Now that he mentioned it, I remembered. He was wearing a jacket to obscure it, but the color and design were different from a real police uniform I'm familiar with. He's still single and lives at his parents' home, so I thought he might be available. I just asked him if he could help out, and he came right over. It's good to have friends you can count on. With that, my husband laughed heartily as if he had successfully pulled off a prank. Mom said it was just a prank, so this was a prank back, a huge success. I wasn't sure if she could hear us from the back room where she hadn't emerged. More than the truth about the fake cop, the sincere declaration to cut ties from her son had deeply affected her. After that, I never met her again. Well, technically, she's my ex-mother-in-law now. Even my father-in-law reached his limit with her overbearing behavior and they divorced. She got some of the property, so she started living alone, but she was in a daze, having lost her son, her purpose in life. My husband frequently receives voicemails like, "Please forgive me. I beg you, forgive me." But he finds them creepy and has blocked her number. He's serious about never seeing her again. Though he acknowledges the debt of being raised by her, whether he will never meet her again in his life is uncertain. What's clear is that she will likely never meet me or our child. Recently, her house has become known as a hoarding house, but that's none of my business. I think to myself, she might as well be buried under it. Maybe I am a bit of a demon wife. Months later, a beautiful baby was born to us. Our baby is the apple of my eye. However, I still can't understand an obsession like my former mother-in-law's. Raising a child is tough but okay. I have a husband who loves and protects his family. No matter what problems may arise in the future, we'll be okay. Surely, we can be a happy family, always smiling together.
Here you go. Use this to order some takeout or something.
Hey, how much cash do you have on you right now?
Huh?
Cash?
You should have some stashed away for emergencies, right?
How much do you have in total? I wondered why he was asking such a question. It wasn't any of his business. I thought that, but there was no need to hide anything.
About $20,000, I guess. It's all in the safe.
As I said that, he grinned and left his room. Wait a minute, where is he going? I didn't want to believe it, but there's no way he would do such a thing. There's absolutely no way he would steal money from me again. I wanted to believe that, but he headed straight to my room. Could he be trying to steal my money? The thought made my skin crawl, and in a panic, I hurriedly moved my wheelchair back to my room. There, he already had the safe open and was holding the cash. I generally use the same password for everything, like on my phone, so he probably knew it.
Wait a minute, what are you thinking? Leave the money and go back to your room.
Yeah, right, like I'd say that? Actually, we're all going on a trip now. I'm gonna blow it all there.
What are you talking about? If you want money for a trip, there are ways to ask. Taking it like this is just like stealing.
Doesn't really matter, does it?
It ends up being for me anyway, and since I'm still a minor, you, being my parent, have the responsibility to take care of me.
Well, since you're just a fake parent, you probably don't feel that responsibility anyway. The word fake parent tore at my heart. Of course, I had to be angry about him trying to steal the money, and indeed, I was angry. But until now, even though we hadn't communicated well, I had continued to support him in many ways. To be called a fake parent just like that. Why are you crying? It's kinda creepy. As he said that, his eyes changed, and he started approaching me. This is bad, he might do something. Instinctively, my fear skyrocketed, and my heartbeat surged. I didn't know what he was going to do, but I tensed up all over and averted my eyes from him, but then, in the next moment, with a loud crash, my body was slammed to the floor. He had kicked my wheelchair hard.
Ouch, what are you doing? If I take this part off, now your wheelchair is useless. You're paralyzed in both legs, right? Wonder if you'll last until Dad gets home.
This is bad, he no longer had the eyes of a human. What he was doing was purely demonic. Next, he took my phone and left the house. What should I do? My husband is on a business trip, and if I'm left like this. As I battled this terror, 5 hours passed, and then the front door opened. My name is Sally. I'm currently 35 years old and living at my parents' home. I'm not working at a company, and at 35, living at home, many might wonder what I'm doing with my life. I was in a car accident 3 years ago, which left me paralyzed in both legs. Since then, I've been unable to live alone, and though it's a burden, I've been receiving care at my parents' home.
Mom, could you drive me to the station this Saturday? I can do it in the evening. Are you going out to eat with friends? Yeah, something like that.
Even at this age, it's embarrassing to talk about romantic interests with my parents. So I dodged the topic with my friends, but actually, I was going to have dinner with someone I was introduced to. They already knew I used a wheelchair and lived at home, but I was still worried about whether they would accept me. Even if there was mutual interest and we started dating, they would be signing up for a life far removed from that of a typical woman. I can't bathe alone or go anywhere by myself. I can't fully manage household chores either. Only someone very understanding could accept all of this, otherwise, I couldn't imagine getting married. But nothing starts if I don't take action, and I must value opportunities to meet people. I made sure to stay positive, so I geared up and went.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming today. I'm glad we could meet.
I've interacted with the opposite sex a few times at work, but often, when they see me in a wheelchair, their faces stiffen, and the conversation doesn't flow well, sometimes not even exchanging contact information. But this person genuinely accepted me, and we had a great conversation.
If you'd like, let's go out for a meal again sometime. I have a car, so I can pick you up anytime. Really? Please do take me out again.
Though we had only gone out for a meal once, we clicked immediately, and it didn't take long for our relationship to turn romantic. After 2 years of dating, we were nearing the point of marriage. We were both over 30, a good age to marry. Since we had been dating with marriage in mind from the start, people around us seemed to think we'd tie the knot soon, but both of us hadn't managed to bring up marriage yet. Part of it was because I'm in a wheelchair, but that wasn't the only issue.
Look, I'm at an age where I want to settle down. I'm not trying to rush you, but I just want to know what you think. We both have our situations, so I'm ready to accept whatever you think. Well, of course, I want to get married. But I haven't talked to my son about you yet. I don't know if he'll accept it. Plus, if you marry me, it won't just be the two of us.
Yes, he has a child from his previous marriage. I'm not looking for someone who's never been divorced, and it's not unusual for someone of a certain age to have been divorced once. I see it as part of life experience, and I think people who have been through a failed marriage might make better partners because they've learned from their mistakes. I think they can lead a more stable life because of what they've learned from their failures. So, I don't have a bias against divorce, but there was no guarantee his child would accept me. Of course, I'm willing to make an effort, and it's not that I don't want to marry him because he has a child. I'd even like to be a great mom, but I'm in a wheelchair, and he has a child, so there were many issues to sort out before we could marry. After 6 months of discussions, we finally decided to marry. We agreed to overcome any challenges together, no matter what they might be.
From now on, let's be a family, okay? Yeah.
His son is 14 years old. Being in the middle of adolescence, and having lived with his father alone until now, anyone would be confused suddenly having to live with a woman in a wheelchair as family. However, I made sure to communicate as much as possible early on to connect with him. But he hardly accepted me, and when his father wasn't around, he would ignore me even if I tried to speak to him. I didn't expect us to get along immediately, but even after a year, and then another, his attitude hadn't changed at all. However, there were times when he did speak to me. It was when he was asking for money again.
I'm going out with friends, can you give me $200? What? Again? I just gave you money last week. You don't need that much just to hang out with friends, do you? I need it, so I'm asking for it. Are you trying to control what I do? It's annoying. You don't even know how we hang out these days, so could you stop butting in? I'm not trying to restrict what you do, but isn't that a bit much? If you're spending $200 every time, think about how much that adds up to in a month.
You promised me, right? You said you'd do anything for me.
Was that just talk?
When he said that, I couldn't respond. I know I've been too lenient. Continuing like this would only encourage his behavior. It's absurd for a kid to spend $200 in one go, and if that's really how he's spending it, I should probably set some boundaries. But if I take a hard stance now, I wonder if he'll ever open up to me. Maybe we'll never have a good relationship, and that thought has kept me from taking decisive action. I couldn't talk to my husband about it, and I stayed silent, but I knew it was time to stop this. While I do have a stable income, so money isn't the issue. Considering his development and our future relationship, I decided it was time to start being stricter. Then, one day.
Hey! What are you doing with my purse?
Nothing much.
Wait a minute.
After I finished eating in the living room and went back to my room, there he was, tampering with my purse. He was startled by my voice and quickly left the room, but I noticed money was missing from the purse. I hadn't been very attentive to the amount of money in my purse, but perhaps he had been stealing money before. Lately, I noticed his clothes and accessories had become more luxurious. He was already in high school and coming home late, so maybe he had a job. He hadn't told me anything, so I assumed he was shopping with money he earned, but maybe he was splurging with my money. Because there was no proof, I couldn't confront him about it, but it was clear this time he had taken some money from my purse. I couldn't let this go, so I decided to talk to my husband as soon as he got home.
I don't know if this is the first time, but I don't think I can just let this go like nothing happened.
Maybe you could talk to him?
I don't think he listens to anything I say.
Yeah, I'm really sorry.
I never thought he would do something like this. I thought we hadn't crossed that line either.
Looking back, I should have mentioned how he always asks for money when he goes out. Given how careless he is with money, maybe sharing everything would have been better. But I didn't want to make the problem too big and be disliked by him. I wanted to handle it as calmly as possible. I think that's how I felt deep down. The next day, my husband talked to him, and after that, he wouldn't even look me in the eye. Gradually, he started going out less, and it didn't turn into a bigger problem. He was nearing his SAT and probably didn't have the time to go out anymore. He was basically home every day studying and preparing for SAT. He still wouldn't communicate with me at all, and I don't know if he will live on his own once he starts college, but it seems unlikely we'll ever get along. Well, maybe it's fine to just enjoy living with my husband from now on. I started to think that way. About 6 months later, he successfully got into his first choice university. It was a private school with quite high tuition, but we were truly happy for him.
Congratulations on your acceptance. All your hard work has paid off. It's none of your business, right? Don't bother me with trivial stuff.
Not that it's trivial to me, though. I hadn't said it out loud, but deep down, I had hoped he would get into his first choice. I hadn't expected him to say that, but well, what matters is the result. If he's happy he got into his first choice university, then that's enough for me. I didn't have much desire to get along with him anymore. And so, he started going out with friends again and seemed to be enjoying his time until graduation. That's part of youth, and I guess I have to provide some money if needed, I thought. My husband was away on a business trip for 2 nights and 3 days, leaving just me and my stepson at home. He doesn't like the food I cook. I went to give him some money for takeout. Then, I said,
"Here you go. Use this to order some takeout or something."
"Hey, how much cash do you have on you right now?"
"Huh?
Cash?
You should have some stashed away for emergencies, right?"
"How much do you have in total?" I wondered why he was asking such a question. It wasn't any of his business. I thought that, but there was no need to hide anything. I had been stolen from once before, but after talking to my husband about it, there had been no such behavior, and I had come to trust him somewhat. He was just a kid, probably just a moment of temptation back then. That's all I thought it was. So I didn't suspect anything this time.
"About $20,000, I guess. It's all in the safe."
As I said that, he grinned and left his room. I didn't want to believe it, but there's no way he would do such a thing. There's absolutely no way he would steal money from me again. I wanted to believe that, but he headed straight to my room. Could he be trying to steal my money? The thought made my skin crawl, and in a panic, I hurriedly moved my wheelchair back to my room. There, he already had the safe open and was holding the cash. I generally use the same password for everything, like on my phone, so he probably knew it.
Wait a minute, what are you thinking? Leave the money and go back to your room.
Yeah, right, like I'd say that? Actually, we're all going on a trip now. I'm gonna blow it all there.
What are you talking about? If you want money for a trip, there are ways to ask. Taking it like this is just like stealing.
Doesn't really matter, does it? It ends up being for me anyway, and since I'm still a minor, you, being my parent, have the responsibility to take care of me. Well, since you're just a fake parent, you probably don't feel that responsibility anyway. The word fake parent tore at my heart. Of course, I had to be angry about him trying to steal the money, and indeed, I was angry. But until now, even though we hadn't communicated well, I had continued to support him in many ways. He was able to go out freely because I was the one providing the money. Of course, financial support was paramount, but I had always cared about him beyond just the finances. To be called a fake parent just like that. What have I been striving for all these years? To think that this is how he sees me, all the while I've been supporting him on my own. At that thought, I couldn't find the words to speak, and tears started to flow. Why are you crying? It's kinda creepy. To think that you felt this way. Why are you playing the victim? You married Dad and got a good life, you should be grateful. I've been putting up with this too, so I deserve at least this much money. And I'm sick of you, so can you just disappear? He said this and his eyes changed as he approached me. This is bad, something might happen. Instinctively, my fear skyrocketed and my heartbeat surged. I didn't know what he was going to do, but I tensed up all over and averted my eyes from him, but then, in the next moment, with a loud crash, my body was slammed to the floor. He had kicked my wheelchair hard.
Ouch, what are you doing?
If I disable this, now your wheelchair is useless. You're paralyzed in both legs, right? Wonder if you'll last until Dad gets back. This is bad, he no longer had the eyes of a human. What he was doing was purely demonic. Was he planning to leave me stranded until my husband returned? While it's not a life or death situation, this harassment is way out of line.
You think this is forgivable?
I don't need to be forgiven. Also, I'm taking your phone.
Hey! Give it back.
If Dad finds out, it won't end well for me. Well, I'll leave it on the table. If you can move, go get it yourself. With that, he put my phone on the table, grabbed his things, and left the house. What should I do now? Of course, my husband would be back once his business trip ended, so I didn't believe my life was in danger for just that period. But I can't even go to the bathroom by myself, I could end up dehydrated. Without my wheelchair, I'm completely immobile. What was he thinking? Doesn't he know the difference between right and wrong? No, I should have realized it the day he stole money from my purse. His true nature. Maybe I turned a blind eye to reality because he's my husband's son and I wanted to get along. But it's too late for regrets now. I have to do something about this situation. But I felt powerless. I just broke down and cried. About 5 hours must have passed when I heard,
I'm home. What? No way.
My husband was supposed to be away for 2 nights and 3 days, but he had come back early. I wasn't expecting him so soon, and relief washed over me, making me cry again. I was so relieved, I wouldn't be left alone for days. I was truly relieved. I didn't know why my husband had returned, but I was just glad he did. However, my wheelchair was broken, and there I was, lying on the floor, crying. Seeing this situation, my husband, perhaps in a panic, rushed over without even taking off his shoes.
What on earth happened here?
I'm so glad, really glad. Thank you. My husband asked what had happened, but all I could feel was relief that he was back. He hugged me and carried me to a chair in the living room. For a while, I just cried and couldn't talk, but he stayed by my side, comforting me.
I'm sorry for just crying. But why did you come back so early? The meeting with the client got cancelled, so I came back earlier. But I was shocked to find you like this. What exactly happened?
Well, actually, after some time had passed and I had calmed down, I told my husband everything from start to finish. Then my husband hugged me again and apologized many times. However, it wasn't his fault. He didn't need to apologize, but at the same time, he was quite angry.
I don't know what he was thinking to do such a thing, but I'm really sorry. Above all, I'm glad you're safe. Maybe he has always seen me as an obstacle. Maybe he saw this as a chance to just take the money and do this. But I can't just let this go. I'll make sure he faces the consequences, so don't worry.
I was relieved that my husband was truly on my side. Thinking about it calmly, I was not at fault at all, and it would have been absurd if my husband hadn't supported me, but that's how mentally cornered I had felt over the past few hours. For now, my husband fixed my wheelchair, and we discussed what to do next. He wasn't just going to let this go by just being angry. I also had my own thoughts. I didn't know how long he planned to be away on his trip, but from the next day, we decided to take action. He returned a week later, probably having had a good time with the money he stole from me. But the fun ends here.
I'm home.
Welcome back, here you go.
What? What is this?
What my husband was holding was the university withdrawal form. He had planned to make the last memories before enjoying campus life at his first-choice university, but a person who had betrayed someone like this shouldn't be allowed to enjoy such a life. After discussing with my husband, we decided to withdraw his university enrollment. Of course, the enrollment fee wouldn't be refunded, but we intended to charge all of it to him. This decision was made because I had planned to pay for his university expenses. My husband had been doing the household chores I couldn't manage, and I had made some investments with a decent return. I was supposed to pay for his university tuition. I hadn't told him that, but my husband had given me full decision-making authority regarding the university. So when I told him that I didn't want to pay for him to go to college, he accepted it without hesitation.
You think someone as low as you can go to college? You're mistaken. College is for decent people. I don't have a cent for you, and you're going to pay back the enrollment fee and the money you squandered. Wait. Come on, stop it, please. Stop it? This is just a color copy. The real one has already been submitted and accepted. What?
I'll never forget the look on his face at that moment. He looked like he had tasted the despair of this world, but the despair I had experienced was far worse. How could he make such a face just because he couldn't go to college? Doesn't he understand what he has done? He stole a large sum of $20,000, leaving me, who couldn't move at all, alone. If he thought he could get away with that, he should start over from kindergarten.
It's already been accepted. What about all the hard work I did for the college? Was all the time I spent studying desperately a waste? Yes. Everything you did was indeed a waste. Are you kidding me? Are you even a parent? To push your own son into this corner, what kind of pleasure do you get from this? You're no different from a devil.
Who are you to talk? You're the one who did something devil-like. All that's happening is that your actions are coming back to haunt you. I don't understand how you can be so outrageously defiant. And to be honest, what I suffered was far worse. You got off easy just having to withdraw from college. You should be grateful, in fact. What do you think would happen if I locked you in a room with a closed key for a week without providing anything? I think I would be justified in doing that much. You probably don't realize what you've done, but this was definitely the limit of my patience.
Do you not understand what you've done? Shut up. First of all, you are the root cause of all this. If it weren't for you, none of this would have happened to me. Get lost, damn it.
Really, it seems he only thinks about himself. As long as he's fine, nothing else matters. Honestly, it's heartbreaking for my husband. As an only son, I think he was raised with great care. After the divorce from his first wife, he raised his son alone until he was 14. Balancing parenting and work, I think he had very little money or time for himself. To have raised him like that and then to be betrayed in this way.
If you're not going to show any remorse, that's fine. We don't expect anything from you after you cross the line. However, you will repay all the money you used and the enrollment fee. After that, we'll sever ties. Please respect this one request. What are you saying? So in the end, you betray me too. You're not a father, I'm disappointed.
Well, you can feel disappointed or whatever you like. I don't feel anything about what someone I'm going to cut ties with thinks of me. It's just sad that no apology ever came from you in the end. When my husband said that, he clenched his teeth and went back to his room. The door slammed shut with a loud bang, but true to my husband's words, not a single word of apology came to the end. He probably doesn't think he did anything wrong. I guess he won't understand unless it's done to him, because he shows no signs of reflection. It makes me question his humanity, but neither my husband nor I have any expectations of him now. Within a month, we told him he needed to move out, and he spent his days not speaking to us at all. Feeling completely abandoned by us and realizing he had no place in this home, he left the house about a week later. Where he's living or if he has a job, I don't know, and frankly, I'm not even interested. He's free to do as he pleases, that was our thinking. Then, one day after a year had passed.
Right, I wouldn't want to bring it up, but I managed to get back the money he squandered and the enrollment fee from that foolish son. What? I thought that money was gone for good, especially since he seemed unrepentant. I thought he would just leave it at that. I thought so too, but I didn't want to let him get away with it as if nothing happened. I found out where he was and persuaded him to return it.
My husband isn't quick to anger, but he has a strong sense of justice. His unyielding nature is probably why he persisted even after a year. Well, I'm surprised he managed to pay it back within a year.
So what's he doing now? Is he working, or somehow managing to go to college? Well, he's crashed at a friend's place and seems to be involved in some shady business.
Just as I thought, he wasn't working a regular job. I wasn't surprised at all. He could commit such acts without batting an eye, so I never thought he was living properly. Getting caught doing something strange or messing up his life, it's none of my business. I think he should do as he pleases, but I was worried about my husband. For my husband, he will always be his only son, and even though we declared a separation a year ago, it's not really possible to completely sever the parent-child bond. So, I wondered if seeing his son so fallen didn't pain his heart? A year has passed, and I worried whether his anger had subsided and affection had taken its place. Are you okay? He will always be your son, after all.
What are you talking about? I don't consider him family anymore.
But
you are the victim here, yet you are so kind-hearted. But rest assured, I just can't forgive him. The moment I see his face, the anger from a year ago wells up, an overwhelming emotion. I've completely severed ties with him, and that fact won't change, so don't worry.
It was reassuring just to hear him say that. A year has passed and my own wounds have healed enough to say this, but if my husband ever wanted to reconcile and be close with his son again as a father and child, I think I couldn't stop him. I believe that the bond between a parent and child is unbreakable. However, if my husband himself has shown such concern for me and is a man of strong principles, I should respect his decisions. Of course, if that boy seeks our help in the future, I won't respond, and if my husband intends to do the same, we will sever ties. From now on, I plan to live a long life together with my husband as a couple. I will continue to cherish my husband. Marriage means supporting and helping each other, no matter the circumstances. However, at this age, everyone understands that sometimes that's just a nice sentiment. Giving up on understanding and supporting each other would indeed mean there's no point in being married. A year ago, my husband helped me without hesitation and has continued to be on my side ever since. He cherishes me above all, and I intend to reciprocate that care. Let's leave the house now while we can. It's okay, we definitely won't get caught. Come on, you're so impatient. Everyone in the family is probably asleep by now, let's just go ahead. It was the night before the wedding, and relatives had gathered at the in-laws' house. In the midst of this, my fiancé, Sean, dashed out of the house with another woman at 1 a.m. I confirmed this while looking at my smartphone and am now secretly following them. As soon as they entered the park restroom, they began flirting passionately, exchanging sickeningly sweet words. It was clearly cheating, and I was utterly disgusted. What does he mean by "we definitely won't get caught"? I already know everything. I could have confronted them right there, but I thought it was too lenient and held back, instead taking a video through a small window in the restroom. Sean, you deceive our family, don't think you'll get away with this. You're going to regret this for the rest of your life. With a seething anger boiling within me, I prepared my revenge. The day of the wedding finally arrived. Unaware of anything, Sean waited with me to make our entrance. On the other side of the door, many people who came to celebrate with us were waiting. The venue was enveloped in a celebratory atmosphere, with guests gathered to honor our happiness. Even through the door, I could feel the guests' excitement rising.
Sarah, let's be happy together for sure,
Sean said with overwhelming emotion. Blissfully unaware, he expressed his joy to me, while I forced a smile, irritated on the inside. Of course. So many people are here to celebrate with us. While I looked at him with cold eyes on the inside, I pretended to be moved. A day we will both never forget is about to begin. Glancing at the overjoyed Sean, I straightened my back. Sean and I were engaged, but not yet legally married. He was working for a company run by my in-laws, which had fallen into financial difficulties right when we got engaged. The in-laws, including us, decided it wasn't the time for marriage and agreed to register our marriage after the company was back on track. While Sean and the in-laws were busy, all I could do was wait. Sean's hard work finally paid off, and they got the business on track. I'm really sorry for making you wait. That's what Sean said when he gave me the ring just recently. Since then, things have moved smoothly, and we were able to make it to today. It's been a tough journey to this wedding, and the guests around us seem deeply moved, repeatedly saying, "I'm glad we made it through," while looking happy. Contrary to that, knowing everything already, my feelings have gone cold, and I was just firming up my resolve to show him hell. It's finally time for the bride and groom to enter, and the entrance music starts playing. Come on, Sean. Everyone's been waiting. But Sean, standing next to me, is pale as if he can't hear my voice at all. He's acting suspicious, looking around.
What's this? Stop it. Please stop.
What's wrong, Sean? I gently call out to Sean, who's covering his ears. Actually, I had the song that was supposed to play on our entrance changed at the last minute. And the BGM I chose was the conversation from the time Sean and his mistress were cheating in the park restroom. I had recorded the whole incident. Embarrassing conversations between Sean and his lover echoed through the venue. The guests seemed to notice, and I could tell from behind the doors that the venue was buzzing. It was a grossly vivid voice that was disgusting to hear again. An interaction that could make your skin crawl. And almost make you sick. Honestly, I didn't want to listen to such nauseating audio either. But as Sean desperately screamed, "Turn it off," I smiled and said, "No need to stop it." You were having a lot of fun, weren't you, while wrapping his arm in mine. Come on, Sean, let's hurry.
What are you planning, Sarah? Let go of my hand.
Why? We can't make our entrance as bride and groom unless we're arm in arm. I tightened my grip on Sean's arm to ensure he couldn't escape and stepped through the door. All eyes from the guests were on us. Look, everyone's watching.
Cut it out now.
Realizing what I had done, Sean roughly shook off my arm. Reluctantly letting go, I ignored the furious Sean and took the microphone to address the 39 guests. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for gathering here today, but I have regrettable news. Sean and I will not be getting married. My declaration stirred the room again. Meanwhile, the conversation of Sean and his lover's affair continued to play clearly throughout the venue. It sounded even more dreadful through the speakers, making you want to cover your ears. The guests listened to me with expressions of surprise and confusion. To inform them of the truth, I continued calmly. I dreamed of a happy married life with Sean, but I discovered he betrayed me by having an affair. The room fell silent for a moment, and gasps of "the groom was cheating" were heard from the guests.
Hey, what are you starting now?
Sean tried to stop me by reaching for the microphone. I brushed his hand aside and continued talking, ignoring him. The proof of the affair is this audio you all are listening to right now. The male voice is unmistakably Sean, who was supposed to become my husband today. It's unfortunate that it has come to this, but knowing what I do now, I cannot marry him. I want to end our relationship here today. The guests quietly listened to my speech. I continued to explain how we reached this point. How I discovered the affair, what I felt approaching today. I spoke in detail. At that moment, my heart was filled with thoughts of revenge, but at the same time, I felt a quiet satisfaction that I was finally getting my revenge. My story started causing a stir among the guests, and the atmosphere in the venue turned indescribable.
You really embarrassed me good.
Enraged by the situation, Sean finally lunged at me.
Stop it.
But Sean's in-laws quickly intervened, catching Sean and stopping him. Dad, Mom, I haven't been cheating, I swear. This is some kind of mistake. Someone's trying to frame me. Restrained, Sean was now desperately pleading with his in-laws. It would be hard for anyone here to believe that this was all an act. Sean's seriousness at work was well known. He had been working tirelessly to turn around the company, which had been struggling, a fact well understood by his company's staff and the relatives. That's why the relatives who knew Sean well looked confused. His attitude towards work was respected by those around him, and his colleagues at the company also praised and trusted Sean for his efforts. To those around him, Sean didn't seem like someone who would cheat. My sister, Mary, who also worked with Sean at my father-in-law's company, often told me about how hard Sean worked. Sean himself was aware of his good reputation and was still making excuses, saying, "I wouldn't cheat." He must have thought he could fool everyone. "Sean, we know everything," his father said in a grave tone, and Sean's complexion changed. "What do you mean, you know? That you have been cheating?" Actually, it wasn't me who first noticed Sean's affair, it was the in-laws. They discovered it because of the pet camera they had set up at home for their cat. One day, by chance, that camera caught Sean cheating with his mistress. The shock for the in-laws must have been considerable. Modern pet cameras have very clear video and audio. You can imagine how the in-laws felt seeing their son's vivid affair. Sean and his mistress, not knowing about the pet camera, had unfortunately chosen to meet right in front of it. And it wasn't just once or twice. When the in-laws saw this, they immediately told me about Sean's cheating. When I first heard, I was too shocked to think straight. It was the in-laws who firmly supported me during my turmoil. Moreover, they told me, "If you decide to divorce our son, we'll help you with things like seeking alimony as much as possible," firmly taking my side. With the solid support of my in-laws, I decided to confront Sean's infidelity. First, I had to see it for myself. I decided to use their pet camera to monitor Sean. I set up the camera to send the video to my smartphone, and I checked it diligently. Finally, the day came when I witnessed Sean's affair through the camera footage. At that moment, I saw Sean's infidelity live from my own room. Hearing about it and seeing it firsthand are completely different in terms of the impact. From that moment, I couldn't stand Sean touching me, and even being in the same room with him filled me with disgust. While I still wanted to believe Sean based on just my in-laws' words, this experience was a rude awakening. Having witnessed the decisive moment, I lost all trust in Sean and had to acknowledge his betrayal. The shock of being betrayed was greater than I had imagined, and for a while, I couldn't even swallow my food. But knowing the truth solidified my resolve. I decided to face this issue in my own way until I could come to terms with it. Sean, realizing that everything was out in the open, was dumbfounded next to me. It seemed like he was so shocked that he couldn't even speak. If he thought he could continue living peacefully without getting caught after all he had done, he was incredibly naive. As I watched Sean standing there, looking foolish, I moved forward. Leaving Sean behind, I approached a woman among the attendees. An affair isn't something Sean could do alone. His accomplice, this woman, also needed a wake-up call. As I stood directly in front of her, the woman looked uncomfortable and quickly averted her eyes. But I addressed her anyway. Having an affair with your sister's fiancé, what were you thinking? My words caused another stir in the venue. The guests' voices of surprise filled the room. Sean's mistress was my own sister, Mary. My in-laws and I knew that Sean's affair partner was my sister Mary, but of course, the guests had no idea. The fact that my sister Mary had betrayed me and had an affair with Sean was an unbelievable and shocking truth, leaving the guests unable to hide their astonishment. From the crowd, exclamations like "No way, that can't be true," and "To steal your sister's fiancé, unbelievable," were heard. Amidst this, Mary glared at me, her lips trembling. Since we lost our parents when we were young, Mary was like a parent to me, especially when we were little. She was always my understanding confidant and a reliable presence. Of course, I loved her more than anyone and trusted her completely. That's why it was incredibly hard to believe and forgive that she would betray me and have an affair with Sean. I was betrayed by the two people I trusted most deeply and dearly, my sister and Sean. This betrayal changed my world entirely during what should have been a happy time before my marriage. The happiness I had envisioned was carelessly destroyed by these two. I should have been blessed by my sister today, celebrating my wedding with a joyful heart. I thought marrying Sean would bring me closer to being a real family with my wonderful in-laws. That has now become an unattainable dream.
Why would you have an affair with my fiancé, of all people? That's insane.
When I confronted her, Mary began to talk back without any sign of remorse.
I've been in love with Sean before you two were even planning to marry. I liked him first. You're the one who stole him from me.
Mary claimed that since she met Sean first at the company, she was his real love, and it was me who stole him. That doesn't justify. For you, I've worked hard all my life. I missed out on hanging out with friends and couldn't go to college because I worked part-time jobs, and I studied on my own to get my degree. And after all that, to have my sister steal the man I love, that's just cruel. You've repaid my kindness with betrayal. I took a breath before responding. First of all, I didn't even know you liked Sean, isn't that just holding a grudge? Shut up. What do you even know about Sean and me? Mary raised me, working hard. Because she graduated high school, couldn't go to the college she wanted. She probably felt she sacrificed her own dreams because of me. And now, she resented that I had taken the person she loved. Mary claimed that by stealing Sean, who is important to me, she was getting revenge by taking away the person and the happy marriage life that mattered to me. It's true I have caused Mary hardship. I feel more than gratitude towards her, I also feel sorry and guilty. But that's a different story from this one.
You think you can just be happy after being so ungrateful? You brought this on yourself. It's all your fault.
My in-laws stopped Mary as she tried to physically confront me in anger. We've heard about how Mary struggled to raise Sarah. She must have made sacrifices and really worked hard. But that's a separate issue. No matter the reason, no matter who it involves, infidelity is never justified. That's right, you two are the only family you each have in this world. Betraying the only family you have is unforgivable. Still, Mary wouldn't listen to our in-laws.
Stop speaking as if you understand everything. You don't know what I've been through. Why should Sarah be happy without any hardship? Just because I was born first and am the sister, I've had to sacrifice so much.
She snapped at the in-laws sharply. Instead of apologizing to me, she started to retort, Sean was only going to marry you to use you as a maid. Considering everything up to now, this is only natural. Sean doesn't love you, he's going to marry me eventually. Sean, Mary is saying this, but is it true? When I asked, Sean hesitated and looked away, no, that's not. Mary's indecisive response only made Mary more frustrated.
Sean always says it. His true love is me, and the sister is just a replacement for a maid.
Well, that's true, but... Sean, not clearly affirming or denying, finally made Mary explode.
Just tell her clearly.
As Mary grew increasingly irate, my in-laws and I were just exhausted inside. So I decided to reveal another truth about Sean. Sean has other lovers too. What are you talking about? That can't be true. Of course, you wouldn't know. Poor sister. In fact, Sean has other mistresses besides Mary. He was deceiving not just me but also Mary. However, the overly confident Mary was reluctant to believe these words. Huh? Who would believe such a lie? Are you trying to deceive me into giving up? That's sneaky. Seeing that my sister Mary showed no sign of trust, I decided to show her the evidence prepared by my in-laws, the footage from the pet camera. The video saved on my smartphone showed a man and a woman engaged in an affair, just like in Mary's case, right in front of the pet camera. Can you still deny it after seeing this? In front of Mary, I proved that Sean was cheating with another woman. Mary was in denial, but the evidence inevitably forced her to falter. This must be some mistake, right, Sean? Despite her disbelief, she questioned Sean, but he remained silent. Mary, it looks pathetic to keep denying it at this point. Why not just admit it? You were just another plaything for him, I said calmly while looking at Sean. However, Mary, desperate to defend her position, continued to resist.
That can't be. I am special to Sean. I'm different from you.
Mary, you've said it yourself before. What goes around comes around. This is the consequence of deceiving others. It's what you call karma. I spoke calmly. Yet Mary was furious and exploded in anger. Finally, she started shouting, "Shut up! Be quiet," and began to lash out. The venue became chaotic, and as Mary was restrained by the wedding staff, and the onlookers' attention focused on her, she was hurriedly escorted out of the venue. The guests witnessed the scene and could not hide their surprise and intrigue, causing a stir in the venue. Amid this strange atmosphere, I took the microphone again and apologized to the guests. I'm sorry that this has happened when you all came to celebrate our marriage. I deeply regret having to expose a family disgrace and cause such disruption at this event. It might seem in poor taste to choose a wedding as the place to reveal my fiancé's affair and that his other woman was my own sister. I truly felt sorry for the guests who came to bless our marriage. But the truth is, I was too hurt and saddened not to expose this disgrace on such an occasion. I understand that the betrayal by Sean and my sister Mary cannot be undone, even with actions like these. I truly believe that such matters should be resolved through discussion without involving everyone. However, I just couldn't forgive Sean and my sister. I want them to never forget this and live with regret. And I want all of you here as witnesses to this. The guests at the venue nodded quietly, appearing to sympathize with me. In contrast, Sean received cold stares from everyone and collapsed on the spot. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Sean could only prostrate himself, repeating apologies to no one in particular. But his apologies reached no one, everyone just looked on coldly. Later, Sean was fired from his company. However, he wasn't fired for the affair, but because his misconduct was discovered. Sean had been working hard to turn around the struggling company, but that was just the facade. In reality, he was involved in corrupt dealings that benefited the company. Misconduct is bound to be discovered sooner or later. I never intended to commit misconduct. I did it solely for the company, to turn it around.
Fool! Who asked you to go that far? Misconduct is misconduct, it's not forgivable, and even if you turn things around with such methods, the trust is completely lost.
Scolded by my father-in-law, Sean continued with his pathetic excuses. I knew it wasn't right. I was always wondering when to come clean. But as my reputation continued to rise without the misconduct coming to light, I found myself unable to turn back. Thus, Sean's anxiety grew, and he began to resort to affairs to escape his worries. As a result, you've lost the trust of not only me but also your father-in-law, mother-in-law, colleagues, and everyone around you. This incident resulted in Sean losing the trust of his in-laws and the people around him, and he seemed to be driven into a corner mentally. Finally, I found the words to apologize to my in-laws. Even after that, I kept receiving messages from the surrounding people expressing their regret. And so, having had a change of heart, the message was about wanting to start over. Of course, I blocked their contact and didn't bother replying. I have no intention of ever meeting them again. It seems Sean apologized again to his in-laws and the people around him, but not a single person was willing to forgive him. Once you've lost that trust, it's hard to regain. On the other hand, my sister also got caught cheating and found it difficult to stay at her job, so she decided to quit. The shock of being deceived by Sean had taken a toll on her appearance and mental state. Especially compared to how fashionable she used to be, she now looks like a completely different person in her worn-out dress, with no makeup. Despite all this, my sister eventually came to me seeking help, but naturally, I turned her away. Can you lend me some money? It's not like you can't work, right? You should find a job soon.
I'm the one who raised you all this time. It's too cruel of you to push me away when I'm in trouble. You heartless person.
I truly appreciate everything you've done for me. It's precisely because of that gratitude that I can't forgive what you've done. Let's live separate lives from now on. I've made up my mind to completely sever ties with my sister. I also wanted to repay my sister for raising me by helping her from now on. I wanted us to live as sisters, not as surrogate parents, and do things together that we couldn't before. But even that turned out to be an unattainable dream. I might never see my sister again. The betrayal by Sean and my sister has become an unforgettable event in my life. The shock was immense, and the wounds are far from healing. Even if I've exacted revenge in this manner, it doesn't erase the pain. Even if Sean and my sister suffer, it's no longer my concern. All that remains is the fact of being betrayed, weighing heavily on me, unable to escape. Being betrayed by someone you trusted was more damaging than I expected. But once again, it was my in-laws who came to my rescue. They keep telling me, "We consider you our real daughter and we want you to rely on us anytime." Just hearing those words encouraged me. My in-laws, who have always been on my side and will continue to support me, are like real parents to me, especially since I don't have my own. From now on, I'll live to repay them. With that vow in my heart, I've decided to take a new step forward.
Mom, I've been pinching pennies to send money home, and now you're saying banning me from visiting? Isn't that a bit harsh?
Said the daughter-in-law angrily. Banned from the house? What's that about? I didn't understand what she was talking about, so I furrowed my brows in confusion. My son and his wife always send me money, living alone as I do. I'm deeply grateful for the significant money they send, so being banned is absolutely out of the question. Yet, why has it come to this?
And not even a thank you? That's incredibly rude. Wait, can you explain a bit more about what you're talking about?
Something was off. Something was wrong. I decided to calm down my agitated daughter-in-law and listen to her story. Then, an unbelievable truth came to light.
This is unacceptable. We'll have to teach them a lesson.
Confronted with conflicting facts, the two of us stood up. Thus, I and my daughter-in-law decided to take revenge on the person who caused this misunderstanding. I am Yulia. I've been a corporate worker living frugally with my son Richard since my divorce 10 years ago. Becoming a single mother, I didn't want my son to suffer, so I worked multiple jobs desperately. Maybe my son felt lonely because of it, but I managed to combine the money I earned and the child support from my ex-husband to successfully send him to the private university he wanted to attend. I still remember him saying on the day he got accepted, "Mom, thank you so much. I'm gonna do my best." Children grow up so fast, and Richard graduated from college in no time, then started working at the company run by my ex-husband. Even after our divorce, Richard had a good relationship with his father, and they kept in touch often. I never blamed him for having a relationship with his father, and I didn't complain when he decided to work for his father's company out of respect for his decision. After becoming an adult, Richard married a woman named Natalie. She also worked at the same company. My daughter-in-law was not particularly friendly by any stretch. Even when we met to get acquainted, she was expressionless all the time, and even now that she's married to my son, I've never seen her smile. When we talk, she doesn't start conversations, responding only minimally to greetings and necessary dialogue. She probably doesn't like me very much. My son looked happy with her, so I didn't oppose their marriage and blessed their union. Upon marriage, my son moved out. Living alone in the house we used to share, the emptiness became palpable. While I was happy that Richard had successfully left the nest, I had braced myself for this day, but the loneliness still hit hard. The couple moved to a different city within the same state, so while I could see them if necessary, they weren't exactly close by. I was worried I wouldn't see my son much anymore after he moved out. Though I thought this, he would occasionally drop by even after getting married. At first, I held back because I didn't want to impose on his new wife, but he said, "I thought you'd be lonely if I just disappeared, Mom." He's truly a thoughtful son. The time we spent eating and chatting together was my healing time.
Thanks, Mom, the meal was delicious. And sorry, but...
When my son would come over, he would awkwardly ask for some spending money at the end of his visit. His wife Natalie probably didn't like it, but thinking about him still coming to visit made me want to give it to him. Besides, being newlyweds, they probably had a lot of expenses, like furniture. Sometimes he would ask for a big amount like $1,000, which might surprise me, but maybe he wanted to make a good impression on his new wife. I had given him money a few times as a thank you for visiting. Even though we are family, the way he respectfully bowed his head when thanking me made it feel worthwhile. I'm grateful that my son visits, but I've sworn to live each day without causing any trouble for him and his wife as much as possible. Perhaps it was this determination that led me to push myself too hard at work. I suffered a stroke at my workplace. According to the hospital, overwork was the cause. A coworker noticed something was off with me and quickly called an ambulance, but I was left with a disability. My walking speed has decreased, and I've lost my sense of balance, making it necessary to lean on something to stand up or change direction. Walking alone became difficult. Perhaps if I had eased up on my work, this wouldn't have happened. How am I supposed to explain this to my son? After being told I needed to stay in the hospital for a while, I called my son to let him know about my situation and that I wouldn't be able to come home. Richard and Natalie rushed to the hospital immediately.
Mom, are you okay? I heard about the walking disability.
Richard burst through the door and rushed to my bedside. With a worried look, he gently held my hand. Natalie followed him and stood beside him, as calm as ever. She was expressionless as usual, and it was hard to tell what she was thinking. Her cold gaze seemed to say that this was a hassle. I really can't burden them.
Thanks for both coming, but I'm fine. You're obviously not fine, you're in the hospital. We're gonna visit you often.
It's okay, you don't have to. You tend to overreact.
It's not an overreaction. I'm worried about you, right, Natalie?
When Richard sought her agreement, Natalie reluctantly nodded. Even though I felt uneasy about Natalie, I was internally happy that they were coming to visit. From then on, the busy working couple would visit me on weekends. The conversation was mostly between Richard and me, while Natalie quietly handled things like changing clothes or arranging the visitation gifts. It was fun to talk with my son, but the distance between Natalie and me didn't seem to close. Even when I said thank you, she would just reply in a low tone, no problem, without much warmth. Then one day, Richard came to visit alone. Before I could ask how Natalie was, Richard started speaking.
Hey Mom, I've been thinking of sending you some money from now on.
I was surprised by the sudden suggestion. I never expected my son, who had been asking for pocket money, to offer such a thing. I shouldn't take it, I said, but Richard just gave me a gentle smile. You quit your job, right? With your disability, it's gonna be tough after you leave the hospital. It's better to have some money. Because of my walking disability, I had quit my job since I couldn't work as before. I planned to look for a job I could still do, and with my savings, I should be okay for a while.
That's okay, you and Natalie earned that money, use it for yourselves? What are you talking about? You put me through college. Let me repay you and show my gratitude.
With such a strong offer from Richard, I decided to accept his generosity. I wanted to cherish the thoughtfulness of my son, who was always thinking of me. I was proud to see how much he had grown. From that day, Richard began visiting the hospital alone. With a guilty look, he would hand me $10. Sorry, this is all I can give right now. I was planning to give more, but Natalie gets upset. She says we should prioritize our own family first.
No, I'm just happy you're sending anything. Could you thank Natalie for me? Sure, I'll tell her tonight.
It seems Natalie isn't pleased with the money being sent to me. It looks like she won't be visiting me anymore. Still, since Richard continues to send money, I wanted to at least express my gratitude to Natalie, so I always handed him a thank you note. I carefully put the $10 into my wallet, and the days of chatting with my son continued for 3 months until I was discharged. Walking was still difficult, and I couldn't move around the house as before. While I was hospitalized, Richard had suggested that we might need to remodel the house for caregiving, but that would require their involvement and presence during the process. Thinking I could manage in my familiar home and not wanting to burden them further, I hesitated, but it seemed remodeling might be necessary after all. Caring for me, Richard started coming over once a week around noon. He would do the shopping for me or withdraw a month's living expenses on my behalf. It was a great relief to have Richard taking care of various things. On a certain weekday, after a long absence, Natalie made a rare visit to my house.
I'm sorry for the sudden visit. May I come in?
Natalie's expression was stern. Her voice also sounded somewhat angry.
Yes, of course, but what brings you here all of a sudden? Did you come with Richard? No, I came alone. Richard doesn't know.
A visit without Richard knowing was indeed unusual. I invited Natalie into the living room for the time being. I was about to serve some tea, but she shook her head, so I sat down and she took a seat opposite me. With a stern face, she glared at me and said in a low growling voice,
Mom, I know you don't like me, but I've been saving desperately and sending you a lot of money. Despite that, not only do you not thank me, but what's this about banning me from visiting?
Natalie's words puzzled me, and I furrowed my brow in confusion. A lot of money? Banned from visiting? She thinks I dislike her? What on earth is she talking about? I couldn't make sense of the story, so now it was my turn to ask her.
Wait, what do you mean? That's my line. Didn't you say you couldn't stand me and wanted me to stop coming over? That you didn't want to see my face or speak with me?
I was stunned. How did things get to this point? Apparently, Richard had told her that I had said those things. I had never thought any such thing, let alone said she was banned. Every time I received the money, I had given Richard a thank you note to pass on to her.
I've never said you were banned. There should have been thank you notes as well, right? Thank you notes?
Now it was Natalie's turn to frown. According to her, she had never received any thank you notes. Looking at her expression, she seemed to be telling the truth. That's strange. Richard always said, I'll pass it on to Natalie. Could it really be that she never received any? Before addressing that, there was something else I needed to ask about. It was about a lot of money. I was receiving $10 from my son. The value of a lot of money can be subjective, but to me, $10 certainly wasn't a large sum. However, I cherished it, thinking of it as a kind gesture from Richard and Natalie. But I had a feeling that wasn't what she meant.
I just want to clarify, how much exactly are you saying you sent? If you're receiving it, you should know, shouldn't you? It's $26,000. $26,000?
An absurdly large amount that made me exclaim in surprise. Indeed, that would definitely qualify as a lot of money. But I had never received such an amount from Richard.
Wait a minute, I've only been getting $10 from Richard. $10? Stop joking around, I've been sending Richard $26,000.
Now Natalie was the one astonished. If what she was saying was true, her reaction made sense. The supposed $26,000 turning into $10 was certainly a cause for shock. A strange silence followed our conflicting stories. Natalie, furrowing her brow and looking stern, was the one to break the silence. Mom, actually. She started to speak hesitantly. According to her, it was Natalie who had suggested sending the money in the first place. She raised her son on her own, and she respected me greatly for trying to live independently even now. She was pained to see the series of hardships I had faced culminating in my walking disability and suggested sending money to help. However, Richard opposed the idea. He said their own lives were more important and refused her proposal. After an argument, he reportedly spat out dismissively, "If you want to send money from your allowance, then just do it with whatever you're earned." She had immediately prepared $26,000 to bring on a visitation day, but Richard stopped her.
She told me I'd forgotten to mention, Natalie doesn't have to visit anymore. She's banned from her house too. Mom hates Natalie and she's a burden. Never show your face to Mom again. I'll handle the money.
Richard told her to stay home and took the money she had prepared to send. It was sad, but knowing herself to be reserved and easily misunderstood, she thought it couldn't be helped even if I disliked her. Her respect for me didn't change, even though she felt disliked. But it didn't sit right with her that she was banned and not even thanked while she was sending money from her own allowance. Then, hiding it from Richard, she decided to visit me to speak her mind. I was shocked. Natalie didn't seem like she was lying. It was hard to believe that my kind son would lie to both of us and embezzle money. I had never said I disliked her, but apparently, Richard had been ingraining the idea that I didn't think highly of Natalie for a long time. Her always being expressionless might have been influenced by Richard's actions. Then, a troubling thought struck me. Richard had been managing my bank account. With this story in mind, a dreadful premonition crossed my mind. No way, surely Richard wouldn't do such a thing. I explained the situation to Natalie, and she accompanied me to the bank. Nervously checking my bank account, I was shocked into silence.
The balance is lower.
The amounts Richard had been giving me and the figures in the bank account clearly didn't match. Richard had been skimming money. I could hear my trust crumbling inside. Natalie gently patted my back, offering consolation. Lost for words from the betrayal, she quietly spoke up.
I hate to bring this up now, but Richard said he's staying at your place again this weekend. I'm sorry, but could you ask him to cut back on the frequent overnights? He doesn't come home at all during the weekends.
Hearing the word overnights, I looked at Natalie.
This weekend again? Richard has never stayed overnight. He comes in the morning, eats lunch, and leaves. That was the case last week too. It's always like that, so I assume it will be the same this week.
Natalie's face fell. It seems Richard has been telling her he spends both weekend days at my house, but he doesn't return home. However, his visits are at most half a day long. Since his marriage, Richard had said Natalie would be lonely, and he never stayed overnight at my home. With a saddened expression, she murmured, "I understand," and we parted ways. My doubts about Richard remained. A few days later, I received a call from Natalie. "Richard has been having an affair." Hearing her words, I was speechless for a while. I had suspected something was off when he lied about staying at my place, but an affair was beyond my expectations. That day, suspicious of the discrepancies in our conversation, Natalie had secretly followed Richard after he said he would be home late. He left work on time and met someone. A strange woman appeared, and they walked arm in arm to a hotel. It must have been quite a shock. Her voice, trembling with anger and sorrow, conveyed how deeply Natalie was hurt. Stealing money, lying, and now cheating. I felt ashamed of such a despicable son and apologized to Natalie. The kind face he had shown me all this time must have been part of his schemes. At the same time, anger began to bubble up within me. I can't forgive this. Betraying me is one thing, but betraying his own wife is something else. As his mother, I couldn't just let his misdeeds go unchecked.
Natalie, let's teach Richard a lesson.
My voice was firm, and Natalie seemed surprised by my resolve.
I can't forgive him either. But are you sure? He's your son. He's my son, and that's exactly why I need to correct him. He needs to understand what he has done.
Natalie nodded vigorously, following my lead. Together, we decided to take action against my son. The following weekend, Richard came to my house as planned. After lunch, he began preparing to leave rather quickly. Natalie had told me that Richard said he would be staying at my house that day, but obviously, he had no intention of staying. He likely had plans to meet his mistress. Richard, rummaging through the drawer for the cash card, looked guilty as he spoke to me.
Sorry, Mom, I'm busy today, so I'll just withdraw the money and head back. We haven't done this month's yet, right?
I inwardly smirked.
No, if you're that busy, you don't need to withdraw anything today. I still have some money left from last month, so you can go back without worrying about it.
I feigned ignorance, smoothly declining his request. My usual compliance turning into refusal surprised him, but he persisted.
But Mom, you know having extra money never hurts. What if you run out? With your walking, withdrawing money would be difficult. I think it's fine to take out another month's worth now. Just the necessary amount is fine. If we withdraw too much, it might just lead to unnecessary spending.
No matter how many times he was told, I shook my head in refusal, and Richard's smile twitched unnervingly. He seemed to be straining to maintain his expression. After frowning as if he was in a losing position, Richard then pleaded in a cajoling voice. It was a typical tactic of his.
Then, I really hate to ask, but could you lend me some money? I'm in a bit of a bind. You know, Natalie gets mad about the money I send you.
Instead of sending money and getting scolded, he should just stop sending it. I bit back the retort, forced a smile, and shook my head gently.
Sorry, I actually have to run an errand soon, so I can't help you with money today. Maybe next time. All right, I'll just take the cash card then. That way I can get you the money quickly when you need it.
It seemed like Richard realized that pushing further was futile after being denied 3 times. However, he still took the card and left the house. Normally, I would insist that he not take the card, but today, I let it slide. As soon as he left, I called Natalie.
Natalie, Richard just left the house. Understood. Let's go.
I had asked her to wait nearby my house, and with her help, we secretly followed Richard. He entered a convenience store and stopped in front of the ATM.
Why can't I withdraw any money? Is this piece of junk broken?
Richard's voice was irritable. He couldn't withdraw money and was cursing loudly. The reason was that he couldn't withdraw from my bank account.
Richard, what are you doing? I told you today you didn't need any money. What?
When I called out from behind him, Richard's shoulders jerked in surprise. He had been so focused on the ATM that he hadn't noticed our presence at all. In fact, I had changed the account's PIN a little while ago. Today was supposed to be the day he withdrew money for me. I assumed he was counting on my money, especially since he probably had plans to meet his mistress later and would need it. If he was the type to siphon off someone else's money, I figured he would head to the ATM regardless of what I said. I figured that someone who takes money without permission would head to the ATM regardless of how much I refused. My suspicions were confirmed. The plan was to catch him in the act of trying to withdraw money without permission.
Mom? And Natalie? Why are you here?
Richard was clearly shocked, not expecting us to be there, sweating profusely with disbelief written all over his face. He was sweating profusely, with disbelief written all over his face. Natalie quickly grabbed his arm.
Let's go back to your mother's house for now. You know why, don't you, Richard?
Richard stayed silent, not uttering a word. Quietly, he was led back to my house, and we sat across from him at the table. Natalie was seated next to me.
You were trying to take money from my account without permission, weren't you? And I heard you've been skimming from the money Natalie sends too. She says she's been sending $26,000. Where did the rest go? What are you talking about, Mom? You believe Natalie over your own son? I would never do such a thing.
As I pressed him calmly, Richard frantically denied everything. Then Natalie interjected.
Quit the poor act, Richard. On top of everything, you're even cheating. Cheating? That's outrageous, stop slandering me. Where's the proof?
Despite our confrontations, Richard continued to make excuses, clearly determined not to admit any wrongdoing. He seems determined not to admit any wrongdoing.
Can you still make excuses after seeing this?
I show the bank account balance, while Natalie confronts Richard with photos proving the affair. At that moment, Richard's face turns pale. His usually evasive mouth finally shuts. There's no escaping it now. However, sweating profusely and silent, Richard suddenly slams the table loudly.
What's the big deal? So what if I cheated? Natalie, why do you give her the money instead of me? Give it to me.
Pointing and shouting, Richard suddenly becomes defensive. He was gentle in front of me, but in front of his wife, he was like a tyrant. I had never seen this side of my son before. Now he points at me, shouting angrily.
You say not to withdraw money. But it's only natural for you to give me money after making me feel lonely with just one parent around, isn't it? Every time I came over, you gave me money. Just be an ATM and don't talk back.
Now I'm the one left speechless. I thought I was helping by fulfilling his wishes, thinking he felt lonely. But it turns out, I was just a convenient ATM to him. All those kind expressions were just a facade. I'm completely disillusioned by my son's drastic change. If that's how he thinks, I'm done holding back.
To cheat and then tell your mother something like that is unbelievable. I want a divorce. I can no longer see you as my son. You're going to return all the money you took without permission. And make sure you repay Natalie too.
Both of us make it clear, and then Richard starts to panic. Seeming distressed by the situation, tears fill his eyes as he frantically shakes his head and looks pleadingly at both me and Natalie.
It's not like that. There's a reason for everything.
His continued excuses were frustrating, even for his own mother. Gesticulating wildly, he begins his excuses again, looking like a pitiful abandoned puppy.
You wouldn't know this, Mom, but Dad's business failed and he's been struggling with money. That's why I've been taking money to help him.
What an excuse. Once again, I'm astounded by my son pulling his father into this.
Oh really?
I didn't know about that. Let's call him right now then.
What?
Richard's voice falters against my composed demeanor. I take out my smartphone without hesitation and dial my ex-husband. He probably thought mentioning the name of my ex-husband, whom we divorced, would get him off the hook from my questioning. Richard seems to believe that my ex-husband and I divorced on bad terms, but it was actually an amicable separation. I still occasionally talk to my ex-husband, especially since he knew about my walking disability.
It's me. I heard you failed in business and are struggling financially? No, everything's going well here. Who said that?
It was Richard.
He said he's been taking money from my account to help you because you're in trouble. What's going on?
While Richard panics, I explain everything to my ex-husband, who growls with contained anger.
What? I understand the situation. I'll thoroughly investigate if Richard has been causing any trouble at the company too.
Hearing this from her ex-husband, Richard turned deathly pale. Even within the family, he was causing such problems. It's possible he was involved in some serious misconduct at work too.
I'm sorry. If I had been able to properly educate him both as an employee and as a person, none of this would have happened. I truly apologize to Natalie as well. I'll make sure Richard takes responsibility and compensates.
I nodded and hung up the phone with my ex-husband. But it wasn't just the ex-husband's fault.
This isn't it. Please forgive me, Mom.
My son, still half crying, clung to me, but I knew I couldn't coddle him any longer and glared at him sternly.
You betray your own wife and then try to blame others for the money you've stolen. Shame on you. Richard, I'm disowning you. No way.
I was done letting him leech off me. Unable to make excuses and not forgiven, Richard slumped to the floor in despair. And so, the drama with my son came to a close. Afterwards, Richard and Natalie's divorce was finalized. Through lawyers, he agreed to repay the money he had withdrawn from my account and to deposit monthly the amount he had taken from Natalie's support. Natalie also sued Richard and his mistress for damages and successfully received her due compensation. According to my ex-husband's investigations, Richard had been acting haughty as the boss's son, delegating his work to other employees without doing much himself, and it all came out and he was fired. His subsequent re-employment efforts didn't last, and he's currently bouncing from job to job. Burdened by the repayments and damages, he had to leave the apartment he had been living in and has moved to an old apartment. Abandoned by his mistress, Richard now finds himself lonely and without anyone to rely on. On the other hand, I still see Natalie occasionally since her divorce from my son, and we discovered shared interests, and now she smiles at me when we talk. The frequent contacts with my ex-husband during this ordeal led to us reconciling after 10 years apart. Now, enjoying a renewed marital life, I'm living my days to the fullest. Though it was unavoidable, being hospitalized for 6 months was quite tough. I've completely lost my muscle strength. I just want to settle back into my own home quickly. But here's the thing. When my husband and I returned home, there was a massive amount of luggage belonging to my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. What's all this? What's going on? My husband protested strongly. We were only supposed to temporarily keep their luggage. It was supposed to be all moved out by the time I was discharged. But that wasn't the case. This is my house.
The sick need to leave.
Unbelievable. Things weren't supposed to go like this. Seeing me stunned, they burst into laughter. My husband and I were just fed up and dismayed. I can't stand this kind of relationship anymore. My husband seemed to feel the same. I could tell by the look on his face. We nodded to each other. Let's move out. Right. Enough of these unpleasant feelings. I can't deal with their selfishness anymore. My husband and I decided to go ahead with a plan we had been considering for some time. My name is Ellie. I'm 31 years old. I work in the office for a company that makes surveying equipment. My husband, Tom, and I married at the age of 30 after 2 years of office romance. Both my career and married life are going smoothly, and I'm living a very fulfilling life every day. Of course, there are things that I find disagreeable. Namely, my relationship with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Both of them have incredibly unpleasant personalities. It's hard to believe they're related to my husband by blood. Because of my in-laws, I've had to endure a lot of hardship. Today, I'll share in detail about various things from that time. After getting married, Tom and I were entrusted with the management of a single-family home by my maternal uncle. My uncle has no spouse or children. He was elderly and decided to live in a facility. The house would be empty, so he suggested we take it over, and we inherited it. It's an old house but spacious and nice. The problem is, it's not too far from Tom's mother-in-law home. It's about a 30-minute drive away. Since it's in the same city and relatively close, I was called to my in-laws' house almost every weekend. At first, I thought it couldn't be helped. I thought it might be something like a rite of passage. I was just treated as part of the family. I thought they would eventually leave me alone. But I was wrong. My mother-in-law, Helen, started to use me as her legs or wallet, calling me over every time I had a day off. "I'm sorry, Ellie. My back is bad, so I can't get around much. It's fine with me." What else could I have done but to answer that way? She wanted to go to the doctor. She wanted to go to the supermarket. She forgot her wallet. This month is tough. I drove as asked and paid in advance at various stores as requested. Eventually, my mother-in-law started to take my dedication for granted, and her attitude became more arrogant. If I protested or pushed back even a little, she would act as if she was the victim. "What's with the sulking just because I called you over? As a daughter-in-law, it's natural for you to serve your mother-in-law. Didn't you know that when you married into the family? I told you I had plans this week. Calling me over anyway is terrible."
If you didn't like it, you should have just said no. Coming here means it wasn't that important, right? We're family, so it's only natural that you prioritize us.
She became increasingly uninhibited towards me. She would have me clean the in-laws' house or make lunch. There were also tasks like replacing the wallpaper, weeding the garden, or cleaning the gutters. My mother-in-law claimed to have a bad back, but whether that was true or not, I couldn't say. If someone told me it was all just a ruse to exploit me as a daughter-in-law, I wouldn't have been surprised. There was one interaction with her that I remembered well. It was when that bug appeared in the kitchen. Both of us despised that bug. Just seeing it makes her jump and scream like a little girl, running away nearly 11 yards. That time was no different. The moment I said, "Ah, a bug," my mother-in-law screamed and ran out of the kitchen.
Get rid of it quickly. It's unbelievable. It's your fault, Ellie.
What? My fault? How did it come to that?
Because it is. You didn't clean our kitchen properly, so that's why the bug came out. Just get rid of it quickly and don't let it escape here.
I couldn't help but sigh. Wasn't the mother-in-law, who lived in this house every day, responsible at all? It was astounding she could blame me, who only came to this house on weekends. It wasn't just her who was unreasonable. The sister-in-law living with her, Sarah, was just as terrible. She was a divorcee, cheated on by her husband, and returned from her marriage home about 3 years ago. She loved cigarettes, slot machines, and alcohol, behaving more like a middle-aged man in a woman's guise. She always seemed to carry an irritable mood, making me dread interacting with her. Particularly problematic was her transformation into an even worse character when drunk, becoming violent. She was the kind of person who would throw things and create a scene, constantly causing trouble for those around her. Apparently, she is highly dissatisfied with herself for being a divorcee. She attempted to drown that stress in alcohol. She was truly problematic. On weekends when my husband, Tom, was away on business trips, I would often get calls from my mother-in-law, Helen, about Sarah. "Ellie, Sarah has called from the bar. Could you pick her up?" Me? Can't she just take a taxi home? She seems to be out of money. And it seems she's caused trouble for the bar staff as well. Reluctantly agreeing to go, I found Sarah passed out drunk when I got to the bar. When I told the staff I was Sarah's family, they all made bothered and stern faces. Drunk Sarah had broken dishes and glasses, ruined the food, and disturbed other customers. Because of her, many customers had left. Not only did Sarah reduce the day's sales, but she also damaged the establishment's facilities and equipment. The bar later issued a significant claim for damages, which surprised both Helen and Sarah. This wasn't the first or second time I had to pick Sarah up from the police station. I had become so familiar with some of the officers at the local division that we recognized each other on sight. The troubles and unwelcome episodes related to her were endless. She was truly a nuisance. When Helen and Sarah got together, the trouble seemed to multiply by 2 or 3. In my husband's absence, they began to constantly nag and complain about me. Both became comfortable in the relationship, revealing their lazy and presumptuous true natures more openly. There's a saying, familiarity breeds contempt, but Helen and Sarah didn't seem to care about that at all. My husband, for his part, seemed to be taken advantage of by his mother and sister, suffering from their behavior. "Hey, Tom, can you lend me about $2,000? "What? More money? And $2,000 at that. What on earth do you need it for?" "I'm taking Mom to a spa for some treatment." "You have a problem with that, being her son?" "Tom, are you okay with my back never getting better?" My mother-in-law and Sarah frequently begged my husband for money. Their reasons were to take my mother-in-law on spa resort tours or to visit spa facilities. They really had it easy. Due to our busy work schedules, my husband and I hardly have the opportunity to go on trips. Since they're unemployed, they seem to be having a better time. It was truly frustrating. Busy with work during the weekdays and tending to Helen and Sarah at their home on weekends. This routine placed a significant strain on my mind and body. Without realizing it, my mental and physical health deteriorated. I couldn't shake off the fatigue even with sleep, constantly feeling gloomy, and nothing seemed enjoyable. Even during times that should have been relaxing with my husband, I found myself sighing constantly. Not to be like Mom, but maybe Ellie needs some time off for recovery too. Maybe. I've never felt this tired before. I need to do something about it. Both my husband and I wanted to have children eventually. I'm almost 32. Ideally, I wanted to have our first child in my early 30s. For that, I needed to be in perfect health and free from mental stress. The sudden dizziness hit me on a Friday night. At the same time, I was hit with intense pain. My head hurt so much it felt like it was gonna split open. I couldn't stand up and curled up on the spot, alerting my husband to the anomaly. I was terrified. Because I could tell my speech was slurred. My husband turned pale.
"Don't move! I'll call an ambulance right away."
After being rushed to the emergency hospital and undergoing tests, I was diagnosed with cerebrovascular disease. At the young age of my 30s, I had suffered a stroke. It was a situation where a single misstep could have been life-threatening. Naturally, I was immediately admitted to the hospital. Being with my husband and getting to the hospital quickly was fortunate. I don't smoke, nor do I drink alcohol. I was also not dealing with high blood pressure or high cholesterol. So, why did I suffer a stroke? The doctor who conducted the test said that the exact cause was unclear. It might be because of Mom and Sarah. They were always causing you stress. I hate to say it, but I thought the same. It's partly my fault for always putting up with it, though. Anyway, it's good I got treatment quickly. I need to get my health back as soon as possible. Thus began my long hospital stay. Among various diseases people can suffer from, cerebrovascular diseases often result in prolonged hospitalizations. In my case, symptoms of depression were also observed, which extended my stay even further. I can't forget it even now when my mother-in-law and Sarah came to visit. Despite my husband's instructions not to come, they ignored him and made their way over, saying whatever they wanted.
"Heard you collapsed? Come back home quickly, we're in trouble here." "Right. There are so many things like washing dishes and cleaning that we want you to do. Honestly, I wish I was the one hospitalized. You know, because of my bad back, right? Get better and come back soon. Oh, and we'll be borrowing your room for a while, okay?"
Borrowing my room? What were they talking about? After a while, my husband arrived. He was furious upon seeing them.
Hey! I told you not to come. Why are you here visiting Ellie? Quiet down. It's only natural for us to visit, we're family after all. Besides, make sure you tell Ellie about that thing. By then.
My mother-in-law and Sarah left swiftly. Sorry, I couldn't stop them, my husband said, looking apologetic. I was dumbfounded by their selfish actions. When I asked about that thing they mentioned, my husband said it was about some construction work related to his parents' house. Do you remember the day when the wind was extremely strong? My parents' old house had some roof tiles blown off, and it got damaged by stuff flying in the wind. Now, there's a serious leak. So, it seems they decided to hire contractors to repair the house. It meant they needed to temporarily move some of their belongings elsewhere. Thus, they asked to use our house for storing their stuff. I see. I don't mind. I'll still be in the hospital for a while anyway. That helps a lot. Thanks. We'll make sure everything is cleared out by the time you're discharged. However, after 6 months in the hospital, when I returned home, there was a massive amount of stuff. It all seemed to belong to my mother-in-law and Sarah. My husband was just as surprised. Weren't they supposed to clear it out before I came back? What's going on?
What is all this? What's happening? It wasn't here this morning.
We had the movers bring it in during the day. It's fine, right? You have plenty of space. Exactly. Our house was pretty old, and actually, it was a rental, so we've already moved out. We have nowhere else to go, so it's too late to kick us out now. What a nuisance they are. They burn their bridges and then impose on us. Taking advantage of someone's goodwill like this is unacceptable. My husband protested strongly against this. But they just ignored him. As the argument escalated, unbelievably, my mother-in-law became even more outraged.
This is my house now. If you don't like it, you can leave.
Right. Sick people should leave. It would be terrible if we caught your illness. Seeing my astonishment, they burst into laughter. Just hearing their laughter made me feel sick to my stomach. My husband also worried about the recurrence of my illness. It was truly a difficult and unbearable time. Half a month after they started living in our house had passed. They got comfortable and started talking about wanting to go on a trip again. They said they wanted to heal their tired bodies from the move by soaking in a hot spring. So, Tom, can you lend us about $2,000 again?
What do you mean lend? You've never paid back anything before.
Stop fussing and just give it to us. It's the least you can do as filial piety, right? Pressured by his sister, my husband reluctantly handed over the money. Just how terrible could they be? They prepared that night and left early the next morning. Alone at last, my husband and I looked at each other and nodded. Let's move out. Right. In fact, ever since the cohabitation started, we had been waiting for this moment. Waited for them to go on a trip and leave the house empty. We acted quickly from there. We packed our belongings and contacted a moving company. As planned, we also called the real estate agency and said goodbye to the house we had become so accustomed to. 3 days later, Sarah called my cell phone. She clearly agitated. I could hear my mother-in-law's yelling in the background. No wonder they were upset. The house they had been living in just days before was now up for sale. What's going on? Explain yourself. Why can't we get into the house?
What did you do with our stuff? Explain properly.
Sorry for not notifying you, but we've sold that house.
What? Sold? Don't go doing things on your own. Who do you think you are?
They had no right to say such things. That house was in my name. What I did with it was my choice. They had the nerve to impose on us, and now they were the ones acting entitled. Neither my husband nor I intended to give in to them even one bit.
With all due respect, You and your mother are the reason I had to do this. I didn't want to sell the house, but you left me no choice. Wait a minute. What's that supposed to mean? Are you blaming us?
Yes. The stress from you and your mother might even be why I got sick. It's only natural we'd want to distance ourselves, right?
Don't be ridiculous. Your illness has nothing to do with this.
Who could say there was no connection at all? At least it's certain that the stress caused by them made me suffer. Sarah was still raging on the phone. She was demanding to know where we had moved their belongings. The house is empty. Our belongings were supposed to be there. Where did you put them? Do you want to be sued? Your belongings are stored in a rented storage unit. Would you like them back?
Of course. What are you even thinking?
Then, there's a condition. Please leave us alone from now on. If you promise not to interfere with us anymore, I'll tell you where the belongings are. I had enough of being called upon for money and favors. We wanted to live our lives separately, with as little interaction as possible. My proposal was scoffed at by my mother-in-law, who took the phone from Sarah.
Don't say such stupid things. I'm a mother of you too. A bond like that can't be broken.
We're discussing breaking that unbreakable bond. My husband took the phone from me. It seems he has a lot he wants to say to his mother and sister too. His face was unusually stern, his resolve reflected in his choice of words.
Mom and Sarah, you've gone too far. Lying to me and even moving in. Since that day, I've been angry, so angry I never want to see your faces again.
Hey, Tom. There's no need to yell like that.
Tom, don't get ahead of yourself just because you're the younger brother. And you should stop getting ahead of yourself, you unemployed, divorced woman. Who do you think made this trip possible for you? I'm not giving you any more money.
My husband was furious. His anger palpable. It seemed they realized they had crossed a line this time. Let's calm down and talk. That was a suggestion they made from their side. They wanted to know exactly where the storage unit was and how to retrieve their belongings. Just as we planned. My husband and I looked at each other and agreed, deciding to arrange a meeting with them. 3 days later, we met them in a small cafe. They had been staying in a hotel. Both of them were looking sullen. They seemed to believe that by maintaining their assertive attitude, they could surely make us comply as usual. That's how their faces looked, as if they thought so. We're here. Now tell us where the storage unit is. We'll also be billing you for the cost of the hotel we're staying at. That's ridiculous. If you're gonna say that, then pay me back first for the trips I funded. I've lent you nearly $10,000 in total so far. Pay up now. My husband's presence was formidable. He seemed like a completely different person compared to his usually quiet self. They must have realized they couldn't afford to anger him further. They quickly changed their demeanor, acting overly friendly and submissive. Wait a minute. We didn't mean to anger you. Just, we were also surprised by the sudden change and got a bit irritated, that's all. Right. Let's talk properly. Don't say things like cutting off ties. No, that's not possible. This involves our future as a couple. We're cutting ties with you here.
How dare you speak to your parent like that?
Despite his stern expression, my husband surely didn't want to say these things. It was their fault for forcing him into this position. They were responsible for making us make such a decision. I took over from my husband and reiterated our conditions to them. As I mentioned before, please promise not to interfere with us anymore. No calling us over or asking for money. If you agree, we'll tell you where the storage unit is. You'll also need to pay for the storage fees. And don't forget about repaying the trip costs. What? Don't be ridiculous. Do you think we have that kind of money?
Exactly. Do you understand? Both Mom and I are unemployed.
How could they be so defiant? Do these two even know what shame is? I couldn't say such things so brazenly like this. My husband was clearly taken aback. The anger in his gaze faded.
How can you talk like that without feeling ashamed? You both are like parasites. Stand on your own 2 feet. Don't rely on us. Live by your own means. It's only natural for children to help their parents. Calling us parasites is rude.
Of course, it's natural to help one's parents, and I've always done so. But there's a limit to everything. Besides, neither of you has made any effort on your part and even lied. Right?
Oh! A bug!
It was when I suddenly pointed at my mother-in-law's feet. She quickly stood up from her chair and moved away to the wall after shouting briefly. Such agile movement. It was hardly a movement someone with a bad back could make. She seemed to realize my a bug was a lie. My mother-in-law turned bright red.
You liar! You tricked me!
I'm sorry. But aren't we even? You lied about your back pain, calling me over to do housework and repairs, right?
And what about saying you needed money for a spa treatment? Going to the hot springs wasn't because of back pain, was it? Who's the liar now? Enough with the lies.
She didn't retort. She bit her lip in frustration and glared at the floor. Urged by my husband to take a seat again, my mother-in-law returned, grumbling under her breath. She appeared completely dejected, as if she had no intention of retorting anymore. On the other hand, Sarah still seemed eager to fight. Her eyes were bloodshot with anger.
You both seem to lack any respect for your elders. Taking our belongings, tricking us with lies, calling us parasites. I'm really upset.
We didn't want to resort to this kind of approach or language either. Like I've said before, you pushed us to this point. You need to understand that. I have another request. Please, both of you, start working. Take care of your own lives. That should be doable, right? Both of you are healthy, with no chronic illnesses. You have the time, and you owe me money. If you don't like being called parasites, there's no reason not to work. Sarah glared at us, clearly frustrated. Despite our logical arguments, it seemed she wasn't convinced at all. It appeared that our efforts alone were insufficient to subdue her strong will. But there was no need to panic. This was just we expected. I signaled to someone at the back of the cafe. A man stood up and approached us. Sarah turned pale when she noticed him. The man was Kevin, Sarah's ex-husband. My husband and I had contacted him specifically for this day, and he had agreed to come. Kevin's eyes were cold, showing no signs of affection for her anymore. It's been a while, Sarah. You're still the same, which is disappointing. Kevin, why are you here? Did they call you? What do you mean by still the same? Just like always, you seem to live by lying to everyone around you. Like you deceived me, you've been deceiving Tom and Ellie, right? Huh? You cheating woman. Wait, it was her who cheated. I had been told that it was her husband's infidelity that led to their divorce. However, seeing her not deny his words, it seemed his claim was true. Sarah had lied to us. She was the one who had cheated and caused the divorce. She was vain, arrogant, deceitful, and unfaithful. My dislike for Sarah grew even more. When you returned to your hometown and kept quiet, I thought I would stop fussing over it. But, Sarah, it seems like you're still hurting people around here. So what? What does it have to do with you? It's not entirely unrelated. I'm your ex-husband. If I had been stricter with you, maybe Ellie and Tom wouldn't have had to suffer. What are you trying to say? Make it clear. At that moment, Kevin pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket and slammed it on the table. Sarah turned pale. The paper was titled, Demand for Compensation for Infidelity. It stated a demand for a compensation payment of $60,000 within 1 week. Sarah shook her head and said this was impossible.
I can't pay $60,000. It's impossible. I told you, I'm unemployed, I have no savings, and I only have debts.
So what? If you don't have money, you should work. Work hard and pay back the money. That's the only atonement you can make. And make sure to pay the compensation in one lump sum.
It's impossible, I tell you. Mom, don't just sit there, say something. What am I supposed to say? You're the one who cheated. Don't drag your mother into this. You should work and pay back the compensation yourself.
Finally, they began to turn against each other. How disgraceful. My mother-in-law and Sarah's behavior was revolting to watch. They needed to learn their lesson thoroughly. Otherwise, they wouldn't even consider reflecting on their actions. I then presented a hospital diagnosis report in front of them. This is the diagnosis I received from the hospital. Based on this, I'll be suing both of you. What? Sue us? Don't be ridiculous. Why would you sue us? Didn't I tell you? My illness might have been caused by the stress from you too. That could be considered a criminal offense. As I mentioned a specific crime, both of them looked shocked. If convicted, they could face up to 15 years in prison or a fine of up to $10,000. Hearing the possible sentence made them tremble even more. Realizing they might be sued, they began to panic. Their earlier bravado was nowhere to be seen. They huddled together, shaking. It seemed they no longer had the will to resist or argue. In front of the disheartened faces of them, I spread out another document to show them. What? This is the affidavit I've prepared. I need you, Helen and Sarah, to swear to follow the terms written here. If you break these promises, I will indeed sue you. The affidavit included every possible condition. Never to call me to act like a maid again. No matter how hard life gets, not to beg Tom for money. It also documented the need to work for their own living and to repay the money they borrowed. Additionally, I made sure to include that Sarah must pay Kevin the full compensation amount in one lump sum. After reading through the entire affidavit, they shook their heads, nearly in tears.
Are you devils? There's no way we can agree to this. Pay the full compensation at once? That's impossible. We'd have to go into debt.
Then go into debt. And work hard to pay it back bit by bit. You've been frolicking around till now, so it's time to start working seriously, right? My mother-in-law and Sarah, rejected by us. They finally gave up, their heads hanging low. Seeing them like that, I finally felt a weight lifted off my chest. Later on, they apparently tried many jobs. Building cleaning, traffic guide at construction sites, and pickup staff at a logistics warehouse. It seemed they registered with agencies that dispatch workers for temporary jobs. Perhaps they don't secure steady employment because they fail to pass interviews. After all, my mother-in-law is 65 years old and elderly, and Sarah gives off an impression of being difficult to deal with. Naturally, no company wants to hire them. From now on, they will likely have to continue living day-to-day on short-term jobs. They had to borrow money to pay off their debts and the compensation. The ones who allowed these two, lacking in living skills, to take out loans were unlicensed moneylenders. If they fail to make payments, they will surely face severe consequences. It's only natural that they are desperately working. I once saw Sarah working in town. She was dressed in a uniform and wearing a helmet, directing traffic at a construction site. When our eyes met, she bit her lip in frustration and turned away. She should stand tall since she's working decently, but she's really a strange person. I've also seen my mother-in-law. She was stocking shelves at a supermarket. She was scolded by much younger colleagues, and she also looked bitterly frustrated. Both of them have such poor characters that it's likely just a matter of time before they mess up. Disliked by those around them, they will probably be unable to stay at any job long and will have to look for new ones. They should continue to wander from place to place, regretting their actions along the way. That's all I hope for them now. Since then, Tom and I have been living a normal, happy life. We are no longer harassed by Helen or Sarah. It has significantly eased our minds, and my health has improved. Perhaps because of that, I was able to become pregnant with our first child. I'm currently on maternity leave, spending peaceful days with the baby in my belly. It's a girl. My current goal is to raise her to be a fine woman. In doing so, I will surely tell her about Helen and Sarah. They will serve as examples of what not to become. Though the past few years were filled with hardships, the future will be different. With Tom and our child, I am sure we will have many happy days ahead.